South Korea's weather agency says 2 seismic events took place near a nuclear test site in North Korea on Saturday. It says that a test earlier this month may have caused the activity. The agency had already reported a tremor at around 4:59 p.m. North Korean local time. It now says detailed analysis points to a magnitude 2.6 tremor in the same area at 1:13 p.m. It added that the epicenter of both tremors was about 6 kilometers away from the Punggye site in the northeastern part of North Korea and had an estimated depth of 2 kilometers. The agency says the 2 events were likely natural quakes. It says a shallow fault may have been destabilized due to geological stress from the nuclear test. It added that similar events could occur in the coming weeks. Iran says it has successfully test-fired a new ballistic missile with a range of 2,000 kilometers. This despite U.S. pressure. Iran's state-run television aired footage of the Khorramshahr missile being launched on Saturday. It said the missile can carry multiple warheads and that the latest technology enables it to hit a target with high accuracy. At a military parade in the capital Tehran on Friday, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said Iran will promote its defensive and military power as much as it deems necessary. The missile was unveiled at the parade for the first time. After Iran tested a new rocket in July, the U.S. imposed sanctions, including the freezing of assets in the U.S. of 6 Iranian companies allegedly involved in Iran's ballistic missile development program.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of Defense says its aircraft have flown over waters east of North Korea. Pentagon spokesperson Dana White said on Saturday that F-15 fighters escorted B-1 bombers through international airspace. She added that it was the farthest north of the demilitarized zone any U.S. Air Force plane has flown in the 21st century. White described the mission as a clear message that the U.S. has many options to defeat any threat. President Trump and his senior officials have repeatedly said that they will resort to a military option should diplomatic efforts fail. A series of new sanctions have cut funds for North Korea's nuclear and missile development.
Hear from North Korea's foreign minister, who's set to address the UN General Assembly at any moment. This is an earthquake rocks the North Korean peninsula, sparking fears that the regime may have conducted another nuclear test. South Korea has said, however, this isn't the case. Reporter Greg Palcott is live, joining us from Seoul, South Korea, with the latest on this. Good afternoon, Greg. What can you tell us is going on there?
Hi, Jillian. First, we are watching for what could be a very fiery speech coming from the North Korean foreign minister. He could be speaking in the next hour or so at the UN General Assembly. Remember, this comes after President Trump's speech there, in which he promised to totally destroy North Korea if it threatened the U.S. and its allies, and then after Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, calling President Trump mentally deranged. Also after, as you recall, a North Korean Foreign Minister Ri saying that North Korea could detonate an H-bomb over the Pacific Ocean. And yes, this also comes after a bit of a scare today on the Korean peninsula. Late Saturday Korean time, there were reports of an earthquake in northeastern North Korea, not far from where the regime tests its nuclear devices. 3.5 on the Richter scale, shallow. Chinese authorities said it was related to an explosion. But then South Korea weighed in, the United States weighed in, and they're saying it's a natural quake, but they're saying it might be a geological shift related to that nuclear test that occurred there earlier this month. Meanwhile, in Pyongyang, a very well orchestrated mass rally today against the United States. 100,000 supposedly turned out. One of the speakers today supporting the North Korean leader and his calls to defend North Korea against the United States, saying, get ready for the final decisive battle. It also comes amid new signs on Saturday that China could fall into line and start enforcing the recent UN sanctions against North Korea. There are words that they're going to limit oil supply going into North Korea, also cut down on textile exports coming out. Finally, this amid more saber rattling from the U.S. We're just seeing this in the last half hour. U.S. Air Force B-1 bombers out of Guam, as well as fighter jets out of Okinawa, Japan, flying over international waters. But what is significant, to the east of North Korea, that is to the north of the DMZ. It's the furthest they've flown north in many years, and also, I think kind of significant, it's in the same area where North Korea launched that missile test last week. So a lot of tension on both sides of the DMZ right now. Back to you, Jillian.
That's Greg Palcott joining us live from Seoul. Stay safe, Greg.
We start our newscast with North Korea's foreign minister's speech at the UN General Assembly. Lee Yong-ho's speech capped a week of rising tensions between Washington and Pyongyang, hitting back at Trump, calling him mentally deranged. The top diplomat also warned of a preemptive attack should the U.S. show any sign of military moves against the regime. Our Cha Sang-mi has the details.
Pyongyang is showing no sign of toning down its threats. The North's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho spoke on Saturday at the UN General Assembly, where he warned that the regime will take preemptive action if the U.S. were to show any sign of an attack on the North's leadership or the country. Ri also said the North does not intend to threaten anyone with its nuclear weapons except for the U.S. and those who join forces with it. He claimed it was Washington, not Pyongyang, that is threatening international security and took particular umbrage at President Trump's remarks at the UN days earlier.
He tried to insult the supreme dignity of my country by referring to it as a rocket. By doing so, however, he committed an irreversible mistake of making our rocket's visit to the entire U.S. mainland inevitable all the more.
Ri Yong-ho responded that Trump is the one on a suicide mission and said,
"In case innocent lives of the U.S. are lost because of his suicide attack, Trump will be held totally responsible."
After hearing Ri's combative speech, President Trump tweeted around midnight Saturday that if the regime's foreign minister is really speaking for North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, whom he referred to as Little Rocket Man, then, quote, they won't be around much longer. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres met with Minister Ri after his remarks and asked that Pyongyang de-escalate its provocations and implementation of the UN Security Council's resolutions. Guterres further highlighted the need for a political solution and for continued humanitarian aid to the regime. Meanwhile, as the international community clamps down on humanitarian aid to the north, Radio Free Asia cites officials who say that in a closed-door meeting last Friday, Minister Ri appealed for more aid from the UN Development Program and UNICEF. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
The White House is revisiting its Afghanistan policy at a time of shifting geopolitics in the region. China, with its growing military and economic power, is expanding its influence across South Asia. But Donald Trump sees a bigger role for India, the other regional power player.
We want them to help us more with Afghanistan, especially in the area of economic assistance and development.
It's a risky proposal, one that India's longtime rival, Pakistan, views as a threat.
We don't foresee any political or military role for India in Afghanistan. I think it will just complicate the situation and it will not resolve anything.
But India is cautiously moving forward, agreeing earlier this month to provide more assistance to the Afghan defense forces. The country has already provided more than $2 billion in economic aid to Afghanistan. Afghan officials say they want friendly relations with both countries and insist most of India's investment has been on the soft side.
Health sector, education, infrastructure, and democratic institutions. No country or no one should object on that.
But many in Pakistan do object, and the longtime Indian rival could feel pressured to increase its alleged support for Afghanistan-based militant groups as a counterweight, says Shamaila Chaudhry, who worked on South Asia policy under Barack Obama.
So in this way, the policy that the Trump administration has designed actually contradicts itself. On one hand, we're going to put more pressure on the Pakistanis. We also want them to do more for the United States, and we want them to end relationships with these militant groups. And then on the other hand, we want the Indians to do more in Afghanistan, which will trigger the Pakistanis.
For Mattis, the tricky regional balancing act is made only more complicated by China. China and India recently agreed to de-escalate tensions in their long-running border dispute. Beijing has also frowned at Washington's quickly growing defense ties with New Delhi, which are expected to further expand during Mattis's trip. Bill Gallo, VOA News, Washington.